Let's have a look at prompt literacy. I have some thoughts to share with you after revising Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom and Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology. It's going to be a short video where I'll be looking at a few concentrated points and drawing some very wide conclusions. And I also have some answers about this topic from AI. So, what I'm looking at is the notion of recalcitrance that is discussed by Nick in Superintelligence. And I'm connecting this notion to perceptual constraints in Merleau-Ponty. But bear with me, it has a lot of interesting grounded applications from the points of view of the researchers. So I'm just kind of introducing this research to you. What is recalcitrance? Recalcitrance is the system's resistance to improve. As a word, it can also mean a resistance to authority, right? And authority sets a set of constraints, and a human or a system essentially resists improvement based on these constraints. So the question, why is it happening? And is there an opportunity to break the barriers and these constraints? Part of the book in Superintelligence also discusses AI's ability to have cognitive human function, right? And he is raising a lot of questions and proposing answers on the aspect of emulation of human brain, which is fascinating. And we'll be addressing some of them as we go, but I highly recommend just reading the book. So essentially, recalcitrance is stubborn behavior towards a prompt, perhaps an idea. And this is essentially a space where the system refuses to improve, right? Nick is also talking about the effort rate, and that's the AI's ability to improve, and it can essentially improve faster if there is lower recalcitrance. So that kind of makes sense. Now, I'm sure as prompters, so let's kind of ground that, we have experienced that when we do not get the answer that we want from the AI system, whatever it is, and that kind of frustrates us. So let's look at Merleau-Ponty, because I think he has a lot of interesting thoughts to share that are fully his. So, what is essentially space by Merleau-Ponty's philosophical proposition? Space is the means by which position becomes possible. So phenomenology is all about a phenomenon, how things appear to us. So space is the position, is the means by which position becomes possible, which is a wonderful way of putting it, because essentially for us, for humans to have space, we need to choose to have space. So if we spend a lot of time, say, for example, doom scrolling, then we do not create space for ourselves. And in fact, humans' space is a very precious commodity, which is often occupied by emotional deliverables that prompt a human to act in a certain way. So essentially, we are almost AI projects for certain advertising and other kind of triggers that encourage us emotionally to act from a certain constrained space, right? So they create space for us to do that. But it's also in our ability to create space that we want to create. And that brings me to the second point. Projection. Projection is the intention of a human being that has a hand in how things appear to us. But things appear in space, right? So essentially, we as humans, we create an intention to create space in which things appear. That's the core of my artistic expression. It's all about creating space. And let me tell you, it's not hot buns off the shelf, because people are busy thinking about other things. I'm not saying that if they stopped thinking, they would just consume a lot of this kind of artistic expression that I have. But it is kind of saying that people are very busy to consuming other emotions. And in fact, it's kind of one thing leads to another when we are used to consume a certain sliver of emotion, right? Say excitement about certain cooking ingredients, right? Like, I don't know, bread or cheese. We kind of get excited, and then everything associated with cheese we want to consume because it creates a certain intention and emotional perception. But then it doesn't stop there, you know. If shoes look like cheese, we are also excited about the same shoes, right? That look like cheese. Now, in Merleau-Ponty, our body, human body, is the point of great interest. In fact, everything is perceived from the bodily perspective in Merleau-Ponty's philosophy, because body is a point of action, right? We act from our body. It connects us to the world. And body occupies space. Body means also our brain and our ability to create an intention and then project it into space in which we exist. Speech is a thought, a gesture, a modulation of the body, effectively creating atmosphere in which things appear to us. Speech is something we use to prompt AI. Speech doesn't necessarily mean to me something that is voiced out. It's an internal dialogue for people perhaps who can't speak. It's a way of communicating with other means, perhaps gestures, eyes. It's all a point of communication that comes from the body, because it's the body that's communicating, but that body has an intent that is projecting and then occupying a certain space. It's kind of a chicken and an egg. Now, let's go further. Now, that brings me to perceptual constraints. Because when we intend, we project, and we kind of discuss this whole loop, we essentially create a myriad of possibilities, but we also create constraints, right? Because it has boundary. That is called kind of the perceptual constraints. So that field of perception that we have created in which we act has constraints. In Merleau-Ponty, perceptual constraints grasp form, size, distance, and how things invite us, because they contain meaning. To me, as an artist, this is fascinating, how things invite us. Now, I've always been wondering why I pay attention to certain paintings in the museum and I don't pay attention to some others. And then perhaps on another day, I'm very much drawn to a painting that I haven't noticed before. Or maybe I've never drawn to this, right? It's the perceptual constraints that essentially either accept that painting in the view, or they reject it, or they don't even consider it for action. It is within my intent, right? I lived in my area for a very long time, and it's only recently that I found a small theater, which I could have been going for a very long time. It's because I have changed my intention, and my field of perception also changed. And now this theater invites me. It's an inanimate object. I'm not saying it's talking to me, but it is inviting me because it has a meaning to me as a human. I find it fascinating. I find fascinating our ability to essentially change constraints, and whether human intellect is actually higher and is kind of viewed higher, perceived higher, if we're able to change constraints. Or is it just higher because we can dive deeper into constraints, but that's also changing constraints, right? So it's kind of an endless game. And that is also something that Merleau-Ponty raises in my last point here, because there's so much information. But he says, when we dig deeper, that's not a quote, but when we go deeper into the thought, there is, now I'm quoting, nothing inside than other smaller things. It's endless, right? There are more things to find. And he calls it absolute mystery. Now, let me wrap it up at a point where I'm asking whether AI can perceive the notion of endless perception. Because isn't that one of the core notions that defines the human brain, that creates that cognitive ability to be a human? And I asked AI, in short, to produce an answer to this question. And it says, partly, so the question was, does AI understand that there is an endless number of possibilities as defined by Merleau-Ponty phenomenology? Endless number of phenomenological fields that can be applicable in the way they're applicable to a human being. And it says, partly it can represent many possible framings in the abstract, but it doesn't experience AI, an open-ended phenomenological field. It picks from patterns conditioned by your prompt and its training. So the sense of endless applicability is something it can simulate and enumerate, but not genuinely inhibit. I love this point for various reasons. First of all, sometimes we think, humans, that AI can inhibit endless constraints, but it can't. And it says so here very clearly. And second point, can a human perceive endless constraints, endless phenomenological fields? And when we select prompting exercises, are we taking into consideration the ability of a human, a prompter, to inhibit different phenomenological fields? And if we do, then how do these fields interact within the human and within AI? I would love to hear your thoughts. Honestly, as you might see, I'm really excited about it. I am excited about it because I'm connecting my curiosity here about philosophy and art, which is kind of abstract, to the actual tangible development of AI. And this is the lens that I'm approaching it with. And the lens that I'm always keeping in mind is the governance process, and how we actually make AI safe. So there will be part two, maybe part three, and more on these particular sources. So keep in touch. Like the video if you like it, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more. And thank you for being here.